Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us today for our session. We're going to wait a couple minutes to allow folks to file in for the session today. And while we do that, just want to cover some logistics. Want to encourage everybody to be thinking about questions throughout our session today. We're going to be taking questions through the Q&A, the session Q&A feature on Whova. So please use that to if you have any questions for any of the panelists. That way, other people that might have similar questions can upvote your question, and we'll be able to get to the most pressing questions at the end during our Q&A session. So please take advantage of that. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. So again, thanks everyone for joining our session today. Big thanks to MGBCE for putting on really this first of a kind conference. All the hard work and the thoughtfulness in putting together this event really shows. So let's give them all a virtual round of applause. Thank you. Good job, everybody. So my name is Chris Kutch, and I will be the moderator for today's session, Maintaining Momentum Towards California's Strategic Climate Goals, How REACH Codes Accelerate Clean Construction. So I am the REACH Code Program Manager at Southern California Edison, where I have the great pleasure of helping cities across California successfully adopt local energy ordinances, also known as REACH codes. So as many of you are aware, California is really leading the nation in setting meaningful climate goals and policies to reduce emissions. Policies such as reducing greenhouse gases to 80% below 1990 levels by 2050. So this is really huge. But what's even more exciting is that local jurisdictions are taking up the mantle and reaching faster, reaching further to meet these goals through local energy ordinances. And today we have a fantastic opportunity to hear from a wonderful group of presenters that are in the trenches of this work in their day-to-day jobs. So first we're going to hear from Danuta, and she's with the California Energy Commission, and she'll be sharing the Energy Commission's role in improving REACH codes and describing the increasing momentum across the state from a number of different cities adopting REACH codes. Next, we'll hear from Drew from the city of Santa Monica. Santa Monica has been a trailblazer for REACH codes in the Southern California region, and Drew is going to share some of the new and innovative work the city has been doing to advance REACH codes even further in Santa Monica. Then we'll hear from Robin from the city of West Hollywood, and she'll be sharing how REACH codes fit into their green building program strategy and some of the lessons that they've learned along the way. And lastly, I'll be back to share some of the great resources available to all of you to help you be successful in achieving your climate action goals through REACH codes that might be appropriate for your city. So without further delay, I'm going to hand it off to Danuta.
Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to give you a quick overview of what to expect when you submit a local ordinance for approval to the California Energy Commission. Thank you. The first important point that I want to emphasize, and I will emphasize throughout this presentation, is that REACH codes are first and foremost local codes. The CEC has a limited but important role as prescribed by statute, specifically to approve ordinance applications that meet statutory requirements so that they are enforceable during the time the current energy code is effective. Next slide, please. This is the specific language in the Public Resources Code that defines the role of the Commission. It states that enforcement of a local building efficiency ordinance can occur when the city or county files the basis of its determination that the standards are cost effective with the Commission, and the Commission finds that the standards will require the diminution of energy consumption levels permitted by the rules and regulations adopted pursuant to these sections. Simply stated, CEC approval to enforce is required when local ordinances have more stringent efficiency requirements than the current version of the Energy Code. And this permission to enforce lasts for the duration of that code cycle. The key word here is enforceable. This is the only authority that the CEC is tasked to provide. Next slide, please. So if you are considering a local ordinance, when should you contact the Commission? As early and as often as you like, actually. We're there to help you with anything that we can. We can advise you on everything except the content of the ordinance. And again, here I'm emphasizing the fact that in terms of content, how you will exceed the State Energy Code, the key word is local, and it's for your community to discuss and determine that. When you're preparing an application for submittal, we do encourage you to contact us so that we can answer any questions and prepare you for the process and address your application as quickly and efficiently as possible. Next slide, please. Required in an application, these are the must-haves, the proposed energy standards, and this is in the form of the complete text of the adopted and signed ordinance. Your local government agency's energy savings and cost effectiveness findings, including supporting analyses. There are resources available to help you with this, and that's what Chris is going to discuss with you later in this session. The third item required is a statement of finding by the local government agency that the local energy standards will require buildings to be designed to consume no more energy than permitted by the Energy Code. And finally, any findings, determinations, declarations, or reports, including any negative declaration or environmental impact report required pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act. This is typically a notice of CEQA exemption. Nice to have, but not required, is a cover letter addressed to the Executive Director of the California Energy Commission, basically describing the fact that you are submitting an application for approval. Any staff reports other than those that you're required to provide in supporting the cost effectiveness are really helpful to help us understand your process and the goal of the ordinance. And any copies of public comments that you have received locally, we like to see those as well. We like to see the evidence of local support. Once the application is received, the clock starts ticking. Until this year, it took 4 to 6 months from submittal to approval. The process is shorter now. It typically takes no longer than 2 months, and sometimes it's even faster than that. Once we have the application, staff reviews it for completeness. If it's not complete, staff requests any missing material from you. If it is complete, staff sends a notice to management requesting permission to post the application to the CEC docket for the public comment period. It can take a week or more before the application is actually posted with management approval. In that intervening time, staff studies the ordinance and converts any Word and Excel documents in the application to PDF format, and they're also scanned for accessibility so that they're ready when it's time to post them to the docket. Once applications are posted to the commission docket for the required public comment period, they have to stay there for at least 15 days. Behind the scenes, staff prepares and submits a summary of the ordinance for management and a memorandum for management signature. After management has signed and the public comment period has closed, staff submits a request to the Commission Secretariat to include the application on the next business meeting agenda. Requests have to be received at least 3 weeks in advance of a business meeting in order to be included on that agenda. So once the application actually gets to the business meeting, it's been thoroughly reviewed and is approved. And the ordinance is enforceable as soon as the Commission has voted to approve it. Next slide, please. So in this energy code cycle, which began January 1st of this year, we have so far had 26 jurisdictions that have submitted codes that have been approved. You're going to be hearing from 2 of them today, Santa Monica and West Hollywood. And next slide, thank you. And just to give you a quick summary of some of the things that are in these local ordinances, we have requirements for all electric construction, electric preferred, Cal Green, Tier 1, additional photovoltaics, particularly on buildings that the energy code doesn't specify that must have them, and EV charging infrastructure. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Drew Johnstone with the City of Santa Monica's Office of Sustainability and the Environment. And I'm going to be giving some background into the process we took to implement our REACH code. Next slide, please. It's amazing to think that it was 25 years ago when Santa Monica put out a sustainable city plan. The city's been busy ever since, and I've just listed a few sustainable building policies, programs, and projects from recent years that my work today has built upon. We're actually in our 3rd REACH code cycle, if you could say. We had a mandatory solar requirement on all new buildings in 2016. And then in 2017, we implemented the state's first zero net energy REACH code for low-rise residential construction. That was really successful. We had over 30 projects built in Santa Monica under the Z&E REACH code. When looking at our own city facilities, we have a sustainable building and administrative instructions. So we design and build to really high sustainability standards, such as LEED Gold, as well as Living Building Challenge certification. In 2019, our city council adopted our climate action adaptation plan with really aggressive sustainability goals listed here. And in one section, we have we call for zero emission buildings. And REACH codes is one of those actions in the CAP. And lastly, I wanted to highlight that the city is a member of the Clean Power Alliance, and 100% renewable electricity is being delivered over Southern California Edison's grid to customers in Santa Monica. And as of today, about 90% of our residential and business customers are on that 100% renewable energy rate. So that's been a fantastic program and a way for us to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions associated with the electricity that's feeding our buildings. Next slide, please. This is sort of the process that the city of Santa Monica and really all cities go through when proposing a REACH code and getting it adopted. It's about a 6 to 9 month time frame. So going back, I guess it's been about a year now when sort of our staff proposed REACH code concepts that built upon our previous REACH code. We conducted stakeholder workshops. We invited experts in the community that are architects, builders, energy modelers, as well as our own building and safety staff and architecture staff to give us feedback on the REACH code concepts. And we eventually settled on an electric preferred REACH code, which I'll get into details in a bit, but we had to have cost effectiveness studies prepared to show that the REACH code was indeed cost effective. And then from there, we prepared staff reports. We met with our task force on the environment and our Building Fire Life Safety Commission to get their stamp of approval before going to our city council, where they signed a resolution and adopted an ordinance for the REACH code. And that's when we sent the REACH code up to the CEC for approval, and then the California Building Standards Commission for their approval as well, so we could enforce it locally. Next slide. So it's really important for us to have this most current REACH code evolve from our previous REACH code. We wanted to encourage healthier, safer, lower emission buildings and embrace the clean energy that we're getting from the Clean Power Alliance and Southern California Edison's ever cleaning grid supply, and reflect the sustainability values of our community and city council. And to do that, as I mentioned, we met with stakeholders in the community. We talked about challenges and barriers, and there were some along the way. And it was really important for us to build that, the local support for the code adoption. And for every meeting and stakeholder workshop and city council meeting, this is an open and public process available for public comment. And and once we implement the REACH code, it's really important for us to prepare resources such as a new construction guide and provide technical support for developers as needed. Next slide. So here's a high level sort of bullet points of our REACH code. So we have a mix of both prescriptive and performance details. We require solar on mid and high-rise multifamily as well as non-residential new buildings. We also require solar on major additions. This is if a new story is built, or if a home or building is adding 50% or more square footage, solar photovoltaics are required. In addition, energy efficiency requirements for mixed fuel buildings only. So this is our attempt at encouraging all electric new construction by putting additional efficiency requirements on mixed fuel buildings only. We also added EV charging infrastructure minimums. So Cal Green has EV charging requirements, but Santa Monica upped the percentage for all building types. And finally, we require certified energy analysts to be on the project team. They're experts in energy modeling software and the code, and we've seen great quality improvements now that CEAs are required to work on Title 24 documentation. Next slide. So this is our low-rise residential REACH code in a table here. As you can see, all electric, there's no REACH. You can just build to the state code. But for mixed fuel projects, we require Cal Green Tier 1, which requires an energy design rating of 10 or less, as well as some prescriptive measures listed here. Next slide, please. For multifamily 4 stories and up, and hotels and motels, all electric again, just meet the state code, got the solar requirement, but the REACH code really comes into play with the mixed fuel pathway. We require 5% improvement over standard design. And all of the non-residential, we require 10% improvement over standard design. And this is shown on the Title 24 certificates of compliance. Lastly, I just wanted to quickly mention any new heated pools in Santa Monica. If they are to be heated, only heat pumps and or solar are the heating sources available. And we have our prescriptive solar requirement for major additions. Next slide. Getting to the EV charging infrastructure requirement, Cal Green, as I mentioned, does require EV charger infrastructure, and Santa Monica takes it a step further. Next slide, please. So on the left is the Cal Green requirements, and the columns in gray are the City of Santa Monica's EV charging requirements. We're really proud of the multifamily requirement of 10% of spaces have to have the EV chargers actually installed. Another 20% have to have the panel capacity as well as the conduit go into each space. And the remaining 70% of spaces have to have at least conduit go into the space. So this covers 100% of the parking spaces in new multifamily projects. This also provides opportunity for tenants down the line. Once EV adoption increases, it'll be much less expensive to add the equipment now that the raceway and conduit is on site. In addition, I also wanted to mention the office requirement. We wanted to up it because charging during the day in an office environment, it's also when there's the most solar on the grid. So it's a great time to charge. Next slide. Here's some of the resources that we couldn't have done it without the California Codes and Standards program. It was a collaboration between the utilities and consultants and local jurisdictions to really flesh out what building prototypes needed to be modeled, what REACH code ideas are out there, and really diving deep into to solutions to help local jurisdictions adopt REACH codes. And these cost effectiveness studies were invaluable. And they're all on localenergycodes.com, the Codes and Standards website. In addition, the Building Decarb Coalition has been providing great insights to cities in California. They just released their Clean Building Compass website with fantastic resources if you're interested in adopting a REACH code or building electrification in general. Next slide. And finally, I just want to mention that it's really important for us to educate the community about this REACH code and the Title 24 changes in general. So we hosted a workshop in January. We had about 60 to 70 attendees. Edison was very generous in sponsoring and providing a trainer for 4 hours to educate architects, energy modelers, green building enthusiasts about Title 24 changes, as well as Santa Monica's local REACH code. And we've also published a new construction guide at sustainablesm.org. It talks all about how to meet our REACH code and provide strategies for all electric new construction. Next slide. And that sort of wraps it up to me. I just want to give our green building website here, and happy to stay in touch. Thank you.
Hi everyone, nice to be with you today. My name is Robin Eason. I'm the Senior Sustainability Planner with the City of West Hollywood, originally the land of the Tonga people. And I'm also a board member of MGBCE LA. So very happy to be here today to talk to you a little bit about West Hollywood's single measure REACH code in the context of our green building program update. So similar to Drew, I wanted to just highlight quickly our city's sustainability history. So over the last 20 years or so, West Hollywood has been really actively committed to environmental responsibility, setting it as a core value in 2001, and then adopting some landmark policies in our local green building program and our climate action plan in 2007 and in 2011. And really setting the bar high year over year with various milestones, including an EV charging readiness ordinance in 2018. We're also a member of the Clean Power Alliance and our 100% Green Power City. We've launched a solar technical assistance program, and most recently updated our 2007 green building program, which I'll talk about right now. So this is kind of the I guess, resulting layout of a lot of hard work working with our council and with the community and with city staff related to what needed to go into the green building program update. Our original program was adopted in 2007, so that was right when LEED was still pretty nascent and before CalGreen existed, which was really launched in 2010. And so, 10 years later, the landscape of green building looks very different. It's a lot more mature than it was in 2007. And so one of the things we wanted to do with the update was really take advantage of the fact that we have a baseline state green building code, and then just really kind of align our West Hollywood code with how CalGreen categorizes the green building requirements, and then build off of CalGreen where it makes sense to be either more locally specific or more stringent with our West Hollywood mandatory provisions. And so what we have hoped we've achieved is if a developer is looking at the state code and understanding what they're doing for water efficiency, materials and resources, et cetera, they open up our ordinance and they see what we require in terms of water efficiency, material resources, et cetera. And so I'm really wanting to have a complementary set of requirements that already builds upon the great work of the state over the last 10 years. Next slide. So this really kind of outlines our project timeline for the Green Building Program update. We really kicked off that project in early 2018. Went through an existing condition assessment, worked with the community for some preliminary guidance on what the priorities for our jurisdiction should really be based on our physical characteristics, checked in with our local authorities just to make sure that they were also in alignment with what we had heard from the community. And it was right around that time in August 2018 that I attended a Energy Commission training and really started to realize that there was an ability to maybe do an energy reach code as part of our green building program update process. And so I got a lot of intel from the codes and standards team that were at that seminar. And it was really helpful because they outlined, very similar to Danuda's presentation, of what the compliance process really needed to look like and what ingredients went into how we file to the state if we were to pursue an energy reach code. And so got back from that seminar and worked with our consultant team over the fall of 2018 to kind of figure out whether we wanted to do something similar to Santa Monica or Berkeley, or whether we wanted to pursue more of a single measure reach code. And I think at the end of the day, since we were doing kind of an overhaul of our green building program update, which was pretty comprehensive, and the state's energy code and building code were changing as well at the end of 2019, we felt that that was a lot of change for both our staff and the market to kind of keep up with. And so instead of doing a comprehensive energy reach code like Santa Monica, we decided to do a single reach code within our comprehensive green building program update, and then pursue perhaps a larger energy reach code for the 2022 cycle. Next slide. One of the components of our green building update is a sustainable roof measures. And this really came from our city council that recognized the fact that we are a largely built out city with not a lot of available land for like new construction. So a lot of our projects are reconstruction, but we do have a culture of active roof space. And so from their perspective, it made sense to explore the possibility of taking advantage of the rooftop real estate to incorporate some sustainable mandates on that part of the building. And so what we came up with was a mandate that requires new residential, non-residential, and mixed-use buildings with a gross floor area of 10,000 square feet or greater for a major remodel that simulates the same, to install one of 3 sustainable roof measures. PV size to offset a minimum of 15% of the building's total estimated electrical usage, a solar thermal system to heat hot water, or a vegetated roof covering a minimum of 30% of the roof area not occupied by mechanical equipment or access stairways as a landscaped roof. And the feedback that we got from the codes and standards team was that since we're requiring one of these three things, one of which could be the solar photovoltaics, that qualified as a single measure reach code, because we're essentially requiring that to a universe of buildings that are not subject to the solar mandate of the 2019 Cal Green. And so we're requiring kind of this subset of buildings to do more than what would be required in the new energy standard, and thus that constitutes an energy reach code. Next slide. And so that was intentional. We knew that the solar mandate was coming for single family and low-rise residential. And since a lot of our makeup of our city are sort of 4 or 5-story multifamily residential, some high-rise residential, and then some non-residential property types, we wanted to make sure that we were pushing the needle forward with some of those property types that weren't subject to the forthcoming solar mandate. The other thing I'll say related to this slide is that we did do some calculations with some existing property types just to understand where the threshold made sense for us to set for those 3 different sustainable roof measures, just to make sure that we were in the ballpark of a threshold that wasn't too high, but also still made sure that people met some minimum standard on their roof. Next slide. So similar to Drew, his slide was a lot neater than mine, but it required a potpourri of experts, industry professionals, industry association professionals, and city and city staff and community to come up with our comprehensive green building program update, and to really kind of test some of these ideas off of those that work within our city, both from a review standpoint, but also from a development standpoint. And so we were really privileged to have a number of interested folks willing to commit their time and effort to getting us where we ultimately became. But this just goes to show how many sort of expert minds contributed to a brain trust to get us where we wanted to go. Next slide. And so in terms of lessons learned, I sort of talked a little bit about the first two. The third one I would say was really critical. You know, as we were continuing on with our building update and trying to get in line, you know, on the right months and dates to pass our building ordinance, we saw a potpourri of different California cities bringing, you know, natural gas bans, building electrification codes, codes similar to Santa Monica, and then single reach codes through to their council as well. And so it was really great to understand the lay of the land and what other cities were doing relative to what West Hollywood was doing in order to have that intelligent conversation with our city council. I think one of the great things we were able to do, and that was based on some of my great conversations with the Code and Standards team at that seminar in August 2018, was really understand the timeline needed to get all the state filings in before the turn of the new state code. And so working backwards from that timeline to understand when was the drop dead date that we needed to go to our council to then make the package that Danuta talked about in order to get that in and get that approved before the turn of the year was really, really important. I think all efforts need to make sure that they are community led. We couldn't have done this without the great expertise, time, and commitment of our community. And you know, some of them spoke at our city council meeting and our planning commission meeting in favor of what we had come up with, which was great. And then the last thing I'll say is that we really were thoughtful around wanting to align this with the change of the state code at the end of 2019, just because everything's changing all at once anyway. The market's already hip to the fact that they're going to need to be very on the nose in terms of understanding what changes are coming from the building standards perspective and also from the energy code perspective. And so having a new local code that kind of changed with the state's tide made a lot of sense to us, and we wanted to try to make sure that we aligned ourselves with the state cycle, and we'll probably do the same if we pursue a more broad reach code in the future. Next. And this is just a final slide. These links are active, so if you download this presentation, you should be able to click on the blue links to get you to the various web pages, but a lot of it takes you to our website that has more information about everything that I just spoke about. And I think with that, I will turn it over to Chris.
Excellent, thanks, Robin. Hi, everybody. Again, this is Chris Cush. I'm with Southern California Edison. I am the project manager for the Reach Code program, the Codes and Standards Reach Code program that you've heard a little bit about. So I'm going to be talking about resources available to local jurisdictions. 2020 has really been a banner year for Reach Code adoption across California, and I think probably many of you here are aware of that. And it's interesting to note that more Reach Codes have been adopted this year in 2020 than over the past several years combined. So there's definitely a lot of momentum, a lot of excitement going on statewide about Reach Codes. And you know, the real beauty of Reach Codes is that they can be designed to meet the climate action goals of a local jurisdiction. Santa Monica and City of West Hollywood have great examples of different types of ways to approach Reach Codes that can be adopted to meet their specific local needs. So, you know, when you think about Reach Codes and you think about your jurisdiction, you know, just know that a Reach Code doesn't necessarily have to be like everybody else's. Your Reach Code doesn't have to be like Santa Monica's. It doesn't have to be like West Hollywood. It doesn't have to be like anybody else. It could be specifically tailored to as much or as little as your city needs to meet their own sustainability goals. So at this point, a lot of you are probably really excited about going back and figuring out what's the right Reach Code that would be good for your city and reaching your climate action goals. And you might be wondering, okay, where do I start? And I just want to plug really quickly our website. And I think it's a really good place to start. It's www.localenergycodes.com. Here's a little screenshot of what you see when you get there. So the REACH code adoption process can be really complicated. But the good news is that there are a lot of resources out there to kind of help you along the way. And the better news is that there's lots of support available through our program, the statewide California IRU REACH code program, that is zero cost to local jurisdictions. So I'll repeat that again, zero cost to local jurisdictions. We get this question a lot, that's why I'm just repeating it. And the question is, well, how much does it cost for you guys to help me out? And the answer is actually zero cost to the jurisdiction, which is great. And so the big takeaway here is that the Codes and Standards REACH code program is really here for you. Whatever we can do to help you get through your adoption process, we want to be there as a support. And so here are a couple of things that support and resources that we typically provide a jurisdiction that's interested in REACH code. First and foremost, preparing the cost effectiveness analysis. So you've probably heard this referred to several times. So the reason why this is important is because it's a requirement set by the CEC for a jurisdiction to provide in order for it to be approved. So whatever REACH code that you might be interested in for your jurisdiction, it has to pass a cost effectiveness test. And this analysis can be pretty technical depending on the nature of the REACH code. And again, this is something that our program provides free of cost to the jurisdiction. So we've done several of these cost effectiveness analysis, and they're all on our web page, so you can go there and check those out. Or perhaps maybe there's an analysis that you don't see there and you're interested in pursuing for your jurisdiction. Well, still please reach out to us, because we want to be able to provide that service any way we can. And really quickly, some of the other things that we provide, we help develop model ordinance language. We help develop staff resource or staff reports that you might need to take to your council meetings, putting together workshops for your building officials or for your communities. We're able to do all this through our program. So again, feel free to reach out to us. All this information you can find again on our website, localenergycodes.com. So there's a lot of information out there regarding REACH codes, and perhaps there's some misinformation out there about REACH codes too, which makes it complicated for cities to navigate through. And a lot of the cities that we talk with, they have a hard time figuring out, okay, what's the right REACH code for us? So we've developed this new tool, and it's on our website, and it was designed to help cities kind of filter through all the information out there, all the different REACH code options, and come up with a list of feasible ordinances that might fit the needs and the goals of community. So this is a new tool. Please go to our website and check it out, and let us know what you think. Another really cool resource that we have is an interactive map that gives you some details on which jurisdictions across California may have adopted a REACH code in your region. So, this is a really good starting point for cities that are interested in looking at a REACH code to understand what's going on around them. Starting that conversation, maybe sharing notes about REACH codes with neighboring cities that have adopted a REACH code that you might be interested in. And lastly, I'll talk about some of the additional resources that are on our website. So the Reach Code Village is a growing one. There's lots of organizations like us that are supporting Reach Codes statewide in a whole bunch of different ways, because we all realize that Reach Codes are a really powerful tool to make significant gains in achieving climate action policies. So on our resource page, you're going to find links to all of the different partners that we're working with statewide that we're really all working together to try to support jurisdictions as best as we can towards Reach Code adoption. And lastly, I just want to encourage all of you with this thought. And I really think that as a state, we are at an inflection point in how Californians use energy. And this momentum, if you think about it, isn't being so much carried by Sacramento, but more and more it's being carried by local jurisdictions, adopting local initiatives to accelerate clean energy construction in their local communities. So thanks to everybody, to all the panelists here that work in this arena. It's a really important one. Thank you for all your efforts and those that are joining us today. So with that, we're gonna transition to our Q&A, and we have a good amount of time, about 20 minutes. So I will switch over to my Hova app and look at the questions. And it looks like we have 2. So feel free to add more questions if, oh wait, no, I just refreshed and there's more. Okay, so let's take the first one. Okay, what are some of the Reach Codes each of you are most excited to see cities adopt, and what it means for the future of sustainable development? So does anybody want to take that one? If not, I can kick it off. And
well, I'm excited about Zero Code, put out by Architecture 2030, which is promoting emissions-free buildings that are powered by a combination of on-site renewables or renewables through the grid. Seems pretty straightforward, right? So they've laid out some great documentation on their website to help cities pursue a Zero Code. That's just one that comes to mind right away.
I think I'm excited about distributed energy systems and really kind of seeing that mature, where we're seeing kind of circular movement happening with the transfer of energy and being smarter about taking energy from solar sources and storing it in batteries and using that, when the sun is not around, to power our homes and cars and whatever else might need powering. So.
And at the commission, I can say that we're excited by the leadership that local communities are taking. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Just to piggyback on that, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, Danuta, but I think when local jurisdictions implement Reach Codes, it really shows the CEC that there's local demand to push building decarbonization further, and hopefully in the next code cycle, we'll see even more sort of electric-friendly codes.
That's certainly a topic for discussion internally. Absolutely.
yeah, for me, I'm pretty excited about maybe a less advanced approach to Reach Codes, and that's the electric ready Reach Codes, which in my mind it's a small step for jurisdictions to take, perhaps a better fit for jurisdictions that are maybe not fully on board for a huge step towards decarbonization or anything like that. But essentially it's a Reach Code that requires that any new construction home, regardless, whether it's all electric or mixed fuel, would at the minimum have the electrical infrastructure there already in place, installed at time of construction, so that anytime down the future, a homeowner, for example, may want to put in an electric stove. Well, I mean, if you don't have the electrical infrastructure for that induction stove, for example, then the retrofit's going to be costly. But if it's already in place, then it really opens up the home for real customer choice and making that flip later down the line. Again, this is it maybe not as progressive for some jurisdictions, but then I think there's lots of other jurisdictions as well within California that are looking for maybe a smaller step to take towards clean energy future. So next question here. Okay, what options do lower income communities have to provide equitable access to clean constructions? How can we combat gentrification while creating healthier communities? You might want to take that one.
Well, any local jurisdiction has the opportunity to implement a REACH code. So when you say low-income communities, I'm not sure if that's a whole city or if it's just a neighborhood within a city, but I think the beauty of a REACH code that applies to the whole city is that any new construction project has to comply. And low-income communities or disadvantaged communities shouldn't be left behind in building decarbonization. They need to be prioritized. So, I mean, there were discussions in our REACH code development, like, should we exempt low income buildings or affordable housing developers from our REACH code? And we thought it was more equitable to include them so that they weren't built with, gas appliances or infrastructure that increases fossil fuel usage. We're all about trying to make our buildings healthier and safer for all. So it was definitely important for us to include them. And fortunately, we had meetings with our affordable housing development community, and they were also on board. So it's one part of the question.
And that's part.
I would say, go ahead, Danuta.
Go ahead, Robin. No, go ahead.
The only thing I was going to say is that both Drew and I talked about being part of the Clean Power Alliance, which has been a great leader in figuring out equitable ways to distribute clean energy to all populations, but being very intentional about doing that to or for low-income communities and communities of color within the LA region. And so there's some existing models out there of some of the great work that they're doing, but I think it's top of mind throughout the industry of making sure that we have equitable energy outcomes for all communities.
And what I was going to say is that that's why the cost effectiveness studies are so important, because we really, that's the bottom line. If the energy improvement is not cost effective over the life of the building, which is typically 30 years, then it's not considered.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Danuta. I wanted to add that that nothing we're doing is should add a cost burden on these developers. Any sort of REACH ordinance, the measures have to pay for themselves over the life of the building.
Yeah, those are really good points. I just want to quickly add that, well, I guess I'll plug some of the other activities that are going on within the utility program space. So there are new programs coming online to support more electrification in new construction, and keeping low-income communities and disadvantaged communities in mind. A lot of that funding has been carved out for those specific types of communities. So there is an awareness of the need to make sure that as builders, as cities transition to um, adopt decarbonization related REACH codes, that you know, there are funding mechanisms in place to kind of help that transition for low income customers. Okay, next question here. What other cities in Southern California, if any, are presently working towards adopting net zero codes? Maybe this is a question for Danuta, perhaps?
Can you repeat that, Chris?
The question is, what other cities in Southern California, if any, are presently working toward adopting net zero codes?
We typically don't know until we start getting calls about an application being submitted. I do have a short list of, let me get to the right page here. I do have a short list of jurisdictions that we understand may be considering codes, but I'm not sure how many of them are in Southern California and how many of them are in Northern California. Perhaps the people in Southern California have a better idea.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say that, you know, I've been involved with a couple local organizations that are promoting REACH codes, and I put them in the Q&A box there. But yeah, if you reach out to localenergycodes.com and contact them, they can put you in touch with the group. I mean, because we have regular calls. One of the groups is the Zero Emission Building Task Force. So we talk at least once a month to give each other updates on what our cities are doing surrounding REACH codes. It seems like every call there's some new cities joining the fray. So I'd say there's probably a dozen or so that are sort of tinkering with REACH codes, but they're at different stages of their process.
Thank you.
Oh, and I also wanted to plug that the U.S. Green Building Council LA chapter recently started a building decarbonization working group, and we have a policy committee that's available to help local jurisdictions find resources surrounding REACH codes, and be happy to help you if you work for a city thinking about REACH codes. So you can contact me.
Great. Thanks, Drew. Okay, so the last question is, there's an attendee that has lengthy questions, but would rather just speak to the group. I don't know if that's possible.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, I guess it's possible.
Oh, there you go.
My name is Sarah Waters, and I have the interesting mix of having been a solar developer for affordable housing for a long time, and I'm now working on urban forestry issues, mostly in Venice and other very developed, tightly developed neighborhoods on the West Side. And I had a question for Robin, and I want to say thank you so much for your work in West Hollywood. I've also spent a good portion of my early adulthood in West Hollywood, so I have a real affection for the city. In your REACH codes, did you address the need for some green space and urban forestry to be developed on private projects?
You know, that was so that was a conversation that came up definitely within our community working group. Green space, vegetation, urban forestry is a high priority for our community. And so it's a continuing theme that comes up in various conversations. We're actually updating our climate action plan right now, and that's going to be one of the major topics as well. It did come up. We were a little hard pressed to deal with it outright for the green building program. We do have a flexible development standard that allows for a little bit more flexibility in how developers kind of apply the required open space and green space within their buildings as part of our green building program. But as a next step, we actually have an urban design studio that's looking into how do we make our tree preservation and tree requirements stronger for private development? What does that look like? Are there different design schemes that developers can utilize? Maybe it's a smaller footprint. Maybe we do more micro unit development, what have you. But it's a constant tension in our city specifically, because like you said, we don't have a lot of land that's available right now. And so we're really trying to squeeze out vegetation in our parkways and in some of the available or redeveloped properties and like green roofs and things like that. So it's kind of an ongoing conversation, but we're just now starting to get into the weeds of figuring out how to expand our urban forests in private development. And then we also have an urban forestry management plan that's looking at the expansion and proper kind of replacement and cultivation of our public urban forest. So I'm happy to talk to you more about that offline as well.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I really appreciate it. My other question is kind of a small one. I looked at your rooftop plan, and thank you so much for including solar in there. I wanted to encourage you to not peg the minimum of solars to the energy consumption, because as you know, if it's new construction, the energy consumption of that building is, while it can be modeled, is unknown. And in some instances, it's very hard to get to 15%. And then in other instances, it's really easy to get to 15%. So maybe in the future, you could peg your solar requirements to a certain percentage of rooftop space, assuming it's flat roof. So rather than doing, that would be a little bit more practical with regard to, if you're going to try to max it out.
That's a fair point. Yeah, we were kind of grappling with a number of ways to kind of set out the language for the requirements. And that's why we wanted to make that rooftop measure optional. And so it could depend on whatever the property is, whether they choose PV, they choose solar hot water, they choose green roof. What we wanted to do was kind of see how things go over the next, say, 3 years and get more intel, some lessons learned, and then possibly, kind of refile our our single measure energy reach code in advance of the 2022 code. But that's a great point.
Great, thank you.
One point of clarification, Sarah. Reach codes are the codes, the ordinances that have to go to the California Energy Commission in order to be approved for enforcement. The local jurisdictions can adopt all kinds of different ordinances and for different reasons. They can adopt ordinances for health and safety reasons that are not necessarily energy related or energy dependent, even though there may be some connection, of course, to energy use. So there's more than one way to do these things.
So are you saying that that they could incorporate energy codes? For instance, let's say they were going to require 80% of roof coverage, excluding other equipment like HVAC, et cetera, for energy generation, that would still have to be approved by the CEC?
What I was referring to was your question about green space and tree cover, not PV and solar. That is something that is quantifiable and can be is definitely energy related.
Right. Of course, trees are energy related too. I mean, they do really affect energy usage in buildings. And we've had numerous examples of this, throughout my life, as dealing with, having to when affordable housing projects have to take down buildings, then neighboring buildings immediately feel the urban heat island effect. And we've had, complaints about that. So it's the urban forest it's just, you're right. It's less of a science because it takes a long time to grow a new tree.
It's more difficult to include it in a cost effectiveness study. That's a challenge for you, Chris.
Well noted. We're up to the challenge. Okay, so that brings us up to time. So thanks again, everyone. Another virtual round of applause for our wonderful panelists. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us.